nourishing the mind, body, and soul for the Asian diaspora. Have you eaten? Hey, hello, happy fam. Welcome back to Have You Eaten, where we have conversations with our community members to amplify and to regain our narratives, one conversation at a time. And today I am so excited to have Grace Young Foster with us. She is the founder of the Inclusion Initiative, where she does a lot of amazing work with adoptees of color and foster care alumni. Welcome, Grace.
Hi, thanks for having me, G. So nice to be here.
Yeah. So we always start with how do you identify? And that could be anything from pronouns to ethnicity to however you identify.
Yeah, no, thank you. I identify as she, her, and I am a Korean adoptee, but I'm also a foster care alum. And I'm, like you said, a founder. I'm also a mom and a partner and many, many other things. And I love the themes of these conversations, right? Where we're reclaiming our narratives, really empowering each other to be able to express our full identities. So thank you so much for creating this space.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. And I'm just going to get right into it. You have a blog that you write, and I read a few pieces of yours, and so many things that you said, even though I'm not a Korean adoptee or from the foster care system, there's just so much that you talk about that resonates with me so much as being a Korean American and an
Yeah.
immigrant. And just so you're aware, and I don't think our audience knows this, but my mom actually left me when I was 4 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
while I, was raised by my father, I didn't have a female role model in my life growing up. And so I think a lot of times I feel this connection um, with you and others that I meet throughout this work. So I want to thank you for your writing and thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your honest truth. Um, so to start, tell us about your organization. It's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you for sharing that with me and, being in community with me that way. I think, it leads to the organization I'm building. The more that we can share with each other, right? The diversity of our experience, and the more we amplify each other in that way, the more we realize, like you and I exactly right now, that we're more alike than we are different. And that's like the beauty
Right.
of these conversations. And it's why I built the Inclusion Initiative. And so we're a tech based platform that is elevating the future of work for adoptees of color and foster care alumni. Because specifically, there was such a gap in community, resources, mentorship, and just plain visibility of people who are adopted and people who have experienced foster care in these workplace systems, right, that are focused on, and rightfully so, focused on the diversity of their workforce. But time and time again, throughout my 15 plus years in the workplace, I have never seen a group, an initiative, a program dedicated to people with my specific lived experience. And so I would join organizations within the organizations that
Mm.
supported Asian people or parents, right? I'm a mom, or, different types of things like that. But every time I would go into these spaces, my experience as an adoptee, especially an adoptee of color, my experience as a foster care alumni, it created differences in how I experienced being Asian, and how I
Mm.
experienced being a mom, and how I experienced these different things that I couldn't really bring up because it's not
Mm.
always a safe space to talk about those particular things. And it doesn't always resonate with people, right, that don't share that lived experience. Because adoption and foster care really kind of like idealized, kind of like fairy tale concepts to people where kids
Mm.
get quote unquote saved and rescued, put into
Mm.
homes, and then their problems are solved. The end, happy ending. And for some, that is true. For many others, there's a lot more nuance and complexity that happens when they enter homes and experience life in these homes, especially if they're an adoptee of color or a foster youth that is put into a home, or a foster youth of color that is put into a home that is that is led by white parents,
Mm.
right? And if you're in a predominantly white community, raised by white parents, and you're a person of color, it creates a lot of confusion
Mm-hmm.
and internalized um, complexities of rejecting where you come from, rejecting what you look like, not being able to accept yourself or others around you, right? Not accepting
Right.
you because you are so different. And so, all of these types of experiences, as you saw right in my writing, it really shapes how we view the world, how we view ourselves, and how that shows up in places like work. And
Right.
so the Inclusion Initiative is designed to create visibility of these experiences and to help others around us understand, right? Like we share commonalities of not feeling like we belong, that we're in between spaces, that we are immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
that we have experienced um, things that other communities have, but that we also want support and we're seeking resources as adults after we leave our homes, after we have come into our own, we still need that support, community, and care, like many other groups that
Mm-hmm.
are facing their own challenges, right? And so
Right.
um, that's what the Inclusion Initiative is designed to do, in addition to really creating a robust community and network and connection amongst people with lived experience as adoptees of color and foster care alums. Because we need each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sounds amazing. And, for those of us who don't have that lived experience, oh, by the way, I also love how you start your writing, where it very specifically says it's your story, you're reclaiming your narratives, and that
Yeah.
everybody's experience and lived experience may be different. And so, that said, can you share a little bit about your background and because what I'm sensing is there's a lot that's happened and I've read some of it. But to share with our audience, like, can you share a little bit about your lived experience and what's led you to today?
Yeah. No, thank you for amplifying that, because it is so important that all of us that have experience within these different communities, that we do recognize that not everyone shares our exact experience, and that creates diversity within our communities that is important to honor and important to acknowledge, because that's what makes up our entire community. And so it also, right, helps us fight against the dominant narratives and the dominant tropes that doesn't particularly reflect, right, how we go through and experience these things. So in adoption and foster care, that is very, very true. The different homes we're placed into, the different countries or states that we come from, the different socioeconomic statuses that we experience in the homes that we're in or the homes that we've left. Like this
Hmm.
all is different for all of us. And so I'll just share, I am, like I stated, a Korean adoptee. So I don't know that I was born there, but that is where I have come
Mm.
from. And many, many Korean adoptees actually have records that are not complete, or they're falsified, or they just don't have them. And so we have a lot of gaps in our stories. But so that's why I say, like, that's where I come from. I'm not sure if I was born there. And for me, my age is unknown, my birthday is unknown, my name is unknown, right? All these things were made up for me
Wow.
by the government, by the
Wow.
systems, that placed me into care. And so this is true for so many adoptees that are international and transracial adoptees. So I was found, according to my records, in a local market in Busan,
Mm.
and I was estimated to be about 3 years old, and I was just found alone. And it was
Mm.
clear that I was alone, and there's no one coming for me. It was a common occurrence in the 80s, and so the police took me to the police station, processed me, did paperwork, took photos, whatever it was, and then handed me over to the state entity, and I was placed into an orphanage.
Mm.
And I was in an orphanage in Busan for a while, and then transferred to Seoul to a different orphanage, because at the time the idea was, if we can place kids into Seoul, they might have a better chance of being adopted, because it's a big city, right? And Western countries, including America, right, are more, might be more prone to adopting from Seoul than smaller cities in Korea. So I stayed in orphanages for about 2 years. And I remember the day I was told I was going to be adopted into the States. And it's just such a weird, surreal memory. But, the caretakers in the orphanage, whom I did not have good experiences with, right? Orphanages at the time, I'm not sure what they're like now, but at the time, it's really tough, rough environments, as you read in my writing. And it's simply due to probably the lack of resources they had, the lack of support they had, right?
Mm.
So that trickled down into how the kids experienced their time there. And so I did not enjoy my time in the orphanage. I really strongly remember that. I talked about it a lot, according to, some of my paperwork. I talked a lot about how I really disliked it and felt mistreated. But yeah, there was just a lot of hard things that the kids all around me had to go through. But when one of the caretakers pulled me aside, I was terrified that I was going to be disciplined, because that was like a big thing in the
Mm.
orphanage. And just part of the culture, I think, of Korea at the time.
I could
I was
attest to
terrified.
that. That is true.
Yeah. So I thought I was going to be hit, and I was bracing for that. But she pulled me aside and said, "You're going to America. There's a family that wants you in America." And these are like my memories, so I'm not sure what the exact words were, but this is how I remember it. And
Do you
they
remember how
gave
you
me,
felt?
well, they gave me this purple and white dress that I still have. It had the 80s puff sleeves and stripes. And I remember just touching it, because I hadn't owned anything. My clothes were, I
Mm.
didn't have clothes. Like, I had what I was wearing. I didn't have clothes. And so, like, that, having something that was mine like that was just, I didn't know. I had never had a dress before in my memory. So it was just, I knew this was something different, something really special. I didn't quite understand what was happening, but I knew I was leaving the orphanage. Let me tell you, I felt really happy about that. I remember
Mm.
there being a lot of joy about that. I was given shoes, white stockings. I was given a bag that has Korean writing that I still have. I plan to give it to my daughter when she's a little older. And I just remember thinking, like, I get to, like, live a new life, and I'm getting out of here. And long story short, I eventually flew over with a couple of escorts and landed in Wisconsin. So that was where the family that wanted to adopt me lived. And that was a surreal experience too, because it was really the first time I remember seeing like cars and white people and the airplane, like an airplane was a big deal. Like all like these memories are starting to flood back right now.
Yeah, and you flew here by yourself.
I flew with escorts. So they
Okay, with
have,
escorts.
I was
Okay.
very little. So
Okay,
they had
okay.
escorts that do that from Korea. So I don't remember them. I don't really remember the plane ride. But I remember going into the parking lot and meeting this family that was going to adopt me.
For the first time?
That's yeah. I don't know if they had visited the orphanage before. I'm not sure. That was kind of the standard procedure back in the
Mm.
day, but I'm not sure if they had to do that or not. But there was a white dad, an Asian mom, and a couple of their kids, their biological kids. And I got into their car, and the first thing they did was like hand me a bunch of candy. I had no idea what it was, but it was delicious. I remember just being like over the moon. I was like, I had the best time in that car ride. And I arrived to the home, and it was the first time I had walked into a home in my memory.
Mm.
Like I was constantly being like communicated to. Like I didn't understand English yet, but I knew they were telling me like, this is your home. Like you're living here. They showed me my bedroom. I had my own bedroom. For the first time, I had a bed. I had all these clothes, I was completely overwhelmed because I had no idea what all this stuff was. And I used like a bathroom for the first time. Like it was just, I
Mm.
remember all of these things. And I even remember I fell into the toilet the first time I used it because I didn't know how to use one.
You're like,
So
this is how it goes. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty, when I think back, I'm like, I can't believe I remember all of that. But it makes sense, right? Because it was such a unique, profound experience for a kid of that age to have these kinds of experiences for the very first time.
Yeah.
Like my kid, takes it all for granted because it's all she's ever known is being surrounded by all this. But for me, I went from, sleeping on floors and not having food to like just this abundance. And I just had never seen anything like that before. And I was really, really happy.
Wow.
And the fairy tale, that's like the fairy tale ending that you hear a lot of times. And that's usually where the story stops, right? She made it. She was loved. She had the best life, happily ever after, the end.
Mm.
And again, it does happen for adoptees and foster youth, but many, many of us have a much more to our story afterwards. And for me, what happened was about 2 years later, I had not been officially adopted yet. And the family decided that they didn't want me anymore.
Oh.
And it was a whole list of things. But basically, at the time, right, education about adoption, education about trauma, education about separation and the impacts of that on these kids, right, that were abandoned, orphaned, or taken away from their families.
Mm.
It wasn't a part of the whole process for parents who were looking to adopt. They were not educated about these things. The countries did not communicate these things. The systems did not communicate these things. And not that all of the blame is on one party or the other, right? Parents should also try to be as diligent as possible in understanding what they're getting into
Right.
when they're looking to adopt or foster kids.
You're not buying a toy from a store.
Well, yeah, we're people.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? That intense trauma that we experienced, we had lives that they could not have even imagined. And we couldn't communicate it to them because we were too little. So they had no idea what we had gone through. And I was estimated to be 5 years old by the time I got to them. That was 5 years of trauma. So,
oh my God.
The way that I presented as a child was different than the fairy tale child that they thought they were getting. And I had just, I acted out because of my trauma in various ways. I was withdrawn. I was scared. Didn't trust. I hoarded things. I had attachment issues, clearly. I didn't know, I had to learn, right, how to behave in the Western social cultures and norms. I had to learn English. They threw me in school right away, like just compounded thing after thing that obviously impacted me. And I needed support in a very different way than a normal 5-year-old. So by the time I was 7, right, they felt like they didn't have the capacity to care for me. I remember the day they relinquished me. When they told me they were going to relinquish me, they took me into their bedroom, like the 7-year-old kid. I had my pajamas on. It was right before bedtime. And they sat me down and said, like, Grace, you're a bad kid. We don't want you anymore. And you're leaving in 2 days. And, people always say to me, like, gosh, how can you tell that like this? Like, how are you not like bawling and crying and just emotional? It's like, well, it is what happened to me. I had to go through it and I've lived with it for all these years. This is my story. This is my life. And I remember just being so like fragile at the time, really hurt, but I didn't really know what that meant. All I heard was, right, we don't want you anymore. You're a bad kid. And that stayed with me for a very, very, very long time. Right. And it began this cycle of what you read in my writing, right? Having a mask, protecting myself, being a people pleaser,
being
overachieving, being stoic, all of these things, just building these walls, right? To protect myself from that experience happening ever again. And 2 days later, I left. The social worker came and got me. The parents, sent me off, but there was very little emotion. There was very little anything, right? It was clear that that was really what they wanted. They just did not want me. There was no crying. There was no hugging. It just it felt really transactional. And a lot of times these things are transactional, at the expense of, the kids that are at the heart of this issue. And so I left and went into a foster home in a different part of Wisconsin. And this foster home had a lot of kids. Eventually, there were 20 kids in the home, and there were foster kids in and out, but there were a lot of adopted kids. The majority that were fostered became adopted. And they were of all different races. There were some from Korea. A lot of them were domestic, and they were white or Black domestic foster or adoptees. We had some from Europe, and it was just a lot of diversity within the family. But it was a lot for a brand new kid to take in, right? It was overwhelming. Weirdly, at the same time, it was fun, right? There's all these new people to get to know, but it was super overwhelming. And that foster home for me eventually became my permanent home. And I was officially adopted into that family around 8 years old. And, it was a complicated experience. And I think that is something that's not talked about a lot. Again, like I said before, it doesn't just end when we enter a home or when we're officially adopted.
Right.
There's so much that happens
so
Yeah.
much, but I mean, so much trauma as a child. And to see you today sitting here and talking to you about these experiences, and you're this just amazing woman who is doing amazing things for other people and being of service. Can we talk about how you took care of yourself? Like, how did you, you know, work through some of this stuff? Because it's not just one day you wake up and all of a sudden, no, you're trauma free. I mean, I know from
No.
personal experience, it takes a lot of work, you know? And so what was that journey like?
It's a long journey and it's a continuous journey. It's something that never goes away. I am a lot more healed and whole than I used to be. But to your point, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of intention to name and then understand and then work through these things. And again, like that's why I founded the company I did, because as adults, this kind of support for our community is just like, it's sorely lacking. There's
Mm,
very few resources once people turn 18 or they leave the home or whatever. You know, people kind of like brush their hands and pat their shoulders and like, oh yeah, we did it. We're great. You know, we got these kids through and, you know, they're going to be just happy, healthy, whole adults. Like, no, 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 no. Our journey's just starting because now we have to unpack, right? All of these things and what does it mean for us to be adults and building our own families and our own lives. And for me, oh, gosh, the journey towards reclamation was a big part of my healing process.
mm,
But also, you know, unfortunately, you know, the my connection to my adoptive family is severed. You know, I'm really estranged from that family, and you know, it's not some uh, big traumatic event that happened like all of a sudden, you know, this big culminating moment or something. It's just over time,
mm,
right? The complexities of the experiences can really shake families that adopt or foster because of the trauma that shows up
mm,
and our abilities to navigate that. I also want to talk about resilience for a second because there's a lot of um, tropes and there's a lot of praise for resilience, especially for people who come from backgrounds of trauma and things like that. And, you know, resilience is good when it's something that you are intentionally building for yourself as you're growing
mm,
older and you're learning to navigate the world. And, you know, it's a part of normal life. But when you have had trauma and when you've been put in situations that you've never asked to be in, and they're pretty bad situations, right? And this doesn't just go for the adoptee or foster community. This goes to, you know, people born in poverty, people who are
mhm,
LGBTQIA, you know, people that have been historically marginalized. We have developed a forced resilience
mhm.
that was not of our choice. It was a survival mechanism. Yeah, we're really strong people and we're really proud of being strong people, but we did not seek out to experience all these traumas so that we could be strong people.
Yeah, I
It was forced upon
100%.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. Yeah, I mean, as a child, you weren't asked if you wanted to build your resilience, right? You were thrown into it, and absolutely, I believe that. I'm thinking about little 3-year-old Grace in that Busan supermarket, and a lot of my memories are coming up from when I was 3. That's when we immigrated to the U.S. And
Wow.
man, I there's just so much of your story that is just just resonates with me so much. And so I want to dive a little bit deeper into this healing part of it because, you know, oftentimes growing up, I felt alone. There was a lot of abuse growing up. There was a lot of alcoholism and certain things. And there was a moment that I remember where, as an adult, it wasn't even as a child, it was as an adult, I had to make a conscious decision. Like I'm going to heal. I'm going to take what has been forced upon me in my life and turn it into something different.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I started Hello Happy. And so I am so curious, was there a moment for you like that? Like, was there a moment in time, and how old were you? What was going on? Like, I'm just so curious about that young Grace.
Oh gosh. I don't know that, like, there were several moments that have led to the intentionality of healing and growing and being a thriving person from these experiences. And, part of it, I don't know about you, but for me, there was always this drive inside of me because of what I experienced to kind of prove the world wrong, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I'm going to prove you wrong, world, society, adoptive parents, whoever, parents that
Yep.
relinquished me. I am worth something. I'm worth something. And you don't see it and you don't believe it, but I know I am. And I deserve to be on this earth and be a happy person. And, that's driven a lot of, how I've just moved through the world. And, I built a great career and did it without support and resources in the traditional sense, right? I had to find people along the way that would help me and
Mm-hmm.
would open doors for me. But, it's a lonely journey, as you know. And so that was part of it, right? I'm just going to prove that I'm worthy. I'm going to be here. And another piece of it, right, was being in a relationship that I wanted to keep. I
Mm-hmm.
really care about my husband. We've actually been together for over 16 years. And the first time we got together and started becoming a couple, I realized it was a person I didn't want to shut out, that I didn't want to put walls around, that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
let in. And I wanted to have help me heal. So, like, those personal relationships, those intimate relationships that we build that develops into unconditional love, right? That's a big part of healing journeys, I think, for people. And not everyone gets that opportunity. And so
Mm-hmm.
I know how grateful I am that I have someone in my life that is that person. Another piece was then the the disconnect I was feeling from the Asian American community
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to claim my place in that space. I belonged there. I belonged with Asian Americans, but I had rejected that part of my identity for so long, having grown up in white spaces and having been told, right, this is how you bring value into the world, is how white can you be? Can
Mm-hmm.
you mirror us? Because if you can, then you are worthy in our eyes, right? And
Right,
so it
right.
caused me to reject my Asian identity for a long time. But then I wanted to embrace it because guess what? I was thinking about starting a family. And I could never bring someone into this world that is Asian and not help him or her understand what that means and to feel like they really belong there with me. And so that reclamation journey of my Asian identity really, really helped my healing journey as well, because it helped me also more fully embrace my adoptee identity, my foster alumni identity, and what I wanted to have impact in this world, like how I wanted to show up. It was no longer what society was telling me I should be, right? I had been working toward a particular salary benchmark. I'd been working towards a particular title. I went to NYU to try and achieve like this particular milestone that I thought would make me into what I was supposed to be, quote unquote. But all of that was part of the healing journey, was realizing like, no, I want to be proud of who I am as a person and embrace all of me and not become something that I'm told I should become. So the healing process, I mean, it's been like at least 15 years of working through these things, and it's still ongoing.
Yeah, yeah. And everything that you're talking about, this intersectionality and being a whole person. So, we believe, or I believe, that belonging starts with us,
Yep.
right? It starts inside us and with us. You can't, like, I believe, like, you can't find belonging outside of you. It has to start within you. And we all belong, like, no matter what, we belong. And I just love everything that you're saying about that, and about how community, also finding relationships, and relationships are so important. That's why, like, building the inclusion initiative and doing what you're doing is just so beautiful to me. And so your daughter, I read the piece about your daughter, and being a mom as an adoptee.
Yeah.
And there was a part that you said where you finally had a relative that was a blood relative, and that made me cry.
Yeah.
That was just so sweet, and so, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that moment, I'm sure, was just so profound for you. How old is your
It
daughter now?
was. It was. She's 2.5,
Oh,
going on 10.
yeah.
But yeah, it was really profound. And like the minute she was born, it like didn't sink in. But these last couple of years, it's really sunk in, especially as she's evolving in how she looks, right? She's looking more like me. Some of her mannerisms and personality traits, like I see myself in her,
Uh-huh.
and my husband too, but I like that she, has more of my traits. And like over time, just watching her and I interact, it's almost been like an out of body experience, because there's
Mm,
so many times where I am with her in quiet moments, like her and I alone, or our family alone in our house. And, like she's crying and I comfort her, or she's
mm,
falling asleep and I'm holding her hand. Um, she hurts her little knee and I give her a kiss on her knee, and she's 2.5. And I just keep thinking about all of the times I must have gone through all those things and nobody was there for me like that. And it's heartbreaking, but it's also healing at the same time. And like her being my very first known blood relative, the first one I have ever met, it
mm.
just is incredibly special and profound in ways that only people that have this experience can understand. Because for my husband,
Yeah.
it's just different for him, because he has his whole family, he knows his whole history. They can trace their ancestry back to like the 1600s or something, just wild. And that's great. And his mom's always telling us stories of when he was an infant and beyond, and I don't have any of that.
Mm.
And so just storing up all of these memories and these precious moments with my very first blood relative, like we're starting our own legacy. It's really cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's just not even the right word. It's like, it's beyond cool. It's magical. And all of that is possible because you were able to go down this healing journey and find ways to really take what you've gone through and make it into something that, and I don't want to sound cliche and say make it into something positive, but something something that's giving back. And I think being of service is such a healing thing to do. I
Yeah,
appreciate
and
you so much.
I just want to say too, what something just lighthearted that's really cool is, for as long as I can remember, I have loved noodles and
Uh-huh.
rice and kimchi. And I'm like, my mom, when she was pregnant, must have ate a lot of that stuff, obviously living in Korea. And now, when I was pregnant, like you read all these things about, your kid will develop tastes for food that you
Mhm.
eat. So the whole pregnancy, I was like, I'm eating all the Korean stuff that I can because my daughter is going to like these foods. Dang it. Like if I have to force her like that. And now, even at 2.5, she's always asking for like sticky rice or noodles. She loves kimchi. She loves japchae and all these things. And I'm like, yes,
Oh,
we
amazing.
have that connection and that bond. Like I always imagined that
Mm.
my mom ate these things and that's why I like these things when she was pregnant, right? But now I
Yeah.
know, like my daughter, like really is drawn to these things because I ate so much of it when I was pregnant. Like it's just
Oh,
an extra bond through our culture that we get to have, you know,
yes.
that nobody else gets outside of us. So yeah, that's just another really special thing.
Yeah. You actually introduced us to Jenna, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah, I just want to give her a little shout out. And she's been doing these articles for us around Korean food. And as another fellow adoptee, she talks about just being immersed into the Korean culture and having these experiences with food. And it's great. She did one on kimbap and she did another one on bibimbap. And I think she's going to be doing
Oh,
some more. But
that's
I
great.
love reading those stories and yeah, and I just appreciate you so incredibly much for being so honest, so vulnerable and sharing your story with us and our audience because I think that's part of the healing too is hearing other people's stories, finding those connections and even though they might not be exactly the same, feeling like you're not alone. You're not alone in
That's right.
this. So, yeah. So where can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. So Grace Young Foster is the backhand of the URL. And then we have our Instagram page. So at the Inclusion Initiative LLC. We have our YouTube channel, the same at the Inclusion Initiative LLC. And our website, theinclusioninitiative.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Grace, so much for being with us. This was just, oh, like my heart is so full from having you on and having this conversation. And I know everyone listening will probably feel the same.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So until next time, everyone, this is Have You Eaten with G? And please say thanks to Grace Young Foster again.
Thank you. And G, thanks for all you're doing to bring all of our communities together within the Asian American community. We
Oh,
appreciate you.
thank you. Hello, Happy Fam. Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell. And until next time, I hope your bellies and your hearts stay full.